number 5 Georgia taking down number 2 Texas 22-19 in overtime. Maybe the most beautiful, hideous game I've ever seen in college football, really. But it was an awesome game. We were up against it because we were trying to get back to our seats to watch the Oregon-Penn State game. That game was going on. It was very close to kickoff when that game ended, but it was an awesome game. Let's go over the grades first for each team, starting off with the Georgia Bulldogs. Highest graded player was Daylen Everette with an 85.5 grade. Offensive guard Tate Ratledge, 77.6. Chaz Chambliss, the edge defender, 74.9. KJ Bolden, the true freshman safety, 73.9. CJ Allen, the linebacker, 73.8. And how about Gunnar Stockton being the quarterback that we had to go with here? Because, of course, Carson Beck got hurt at halftime. He finished with a 54.8 grade in this game. For Texas, Andrew Makuba, 82.1, the safety. DeAndre Moore Jr., 81.2. Jahdae Barron, 80.1. Jalen Gilbo, the corner, 74. Offensive guard DJ Campbell, 73.9. And Quinn Ewers with an 86 grade. And we'll dive into that more because I think there's a lot of people saying, how on earth did Quinn Ewers get an 86 grade for yesterday's game? We'll dive into that a lot more as we get into it, Dawn. But for you, the stat that told the story in this game.
Okay, so it was every week there's a game I watch, and I come on either this show or the NFL show with Trevor, and I go, this team should have won the game, but they didn't finish drives. This week, it was this game for Texas. They, by every metric, all total yardage, the grading, pretty much by everything, Texas should have won this game. On top of the fact that Carson Beck got hurt just before halftime and Gunnar Stockton played the rest of the way until the last snap when Beck miraculously came on just for the handoff when I don't know how everybody on Texas sideline didn't know they were running because Carson Beck was incapable of throwing the football.
Yeah.
He could barely even hand it off, and Georgia scored the touchdown anyway. But for me, usually it's a red zone thing. I'm going to expand it a little more. It's the fact that Texas, 6 field goal attempts, okay, and it just kind of encapsulates their inability to finish drives. They got into Georgia territory on 8 out of their 11 drives, all right? And they only scored 1 touchdown all day. 0 for 3 in the red zone, 2 field goals and 1 missed field goal. And one of those was the field goal they kicked in overtime when the red zone is basically given to you, right? And Quinn Ewers, there's several splits here. One is first half, second half. You're going to talk about that. The other one is very much because of him inside the Georgia 30. This is where I cut this off, okay? Before they got to the Georgia 30-yard line, his grade in this game was a 92.8.
Wow.
There were times when Quinn Ewers, especially in the first half and outside of the red zone or getting near it, where he made really big-time throws, and Texas receivers had 6 drops and made the traditional numbers not look as good, and they just didn't execute as a team. Inside the Georgia 30-yard line, he had a 44.4 passing grade. Ewers didn't finish drives. The team didn't finish drives. Everything shut down, and Georgia bent all day, but they didn't break. Bert Auburn was 4 for 6 on his field goals. You just had this situation where Texas, I told you before the game, I think Texas is the more talented between the two teams. First game came down to turnovers and just not being able to run the ball and not being able to handle blitzes. But Texas was, for the most part, the better team in this game. But if you don't finish drives and you're kicking field goals or you're coming away empty, this is what can happen. You let a team that's maybe, I think, slightly less talented, and you leave them hanging in the game, and this is how they can win it. You give them one opportunity in overtime, and Texas actually had to tie the game at the end of the fourth quarter, and then it went to overtime. I mean, it just was a classic case. Again, I see it every single week of the better team overall probably didn't win, and that's because they didn't finish drives. If you don't get 7s instead of 3s and 0s, you leave the door open for a team with its backup quarterback in this case, to win a ball game.
And the other one, Dawn, if you don't take advantage of your quarterback playing out of his mind, you're probably going to lose games as well. And Quinn Ewers, and I'll give him credit, we on the show, even in the preview, said, hey, Texas might have a Quinn Ewers problem. Like, they might need to have a quick hook for him and go to Arch Manning in this game because obviously Quinn Ewers in that game against Georgia was horrible. He had a 30 grade against Georgia in that one. 7 turnover-worthy plays is tied for the most by any quarterback in the country over the last 5 years. In the first half, he was on fire. He had a 92.7 passing grade in the first half, Dawn. But the stat that told the story here is not his passing grade in the first half. Is that they had 6 points in the first half. 6 points when your quarterback has a 93 passing grade is unacceptable.
Played, I would argue, his best half of the season.
I would agree.
And the interception on the first drive, not his fault. Ball kind of tipped around, and Daylen Everette came down with it. I mean, just he was terrific in between the drops and just their inability to finish drives. They have to take advantage of that.
He had 3 big-time throws in the first half alone. One of them was dropped, and one of them was a Matthew Golden touchdown that was dropped. So one of his big-time throws was a touchdown throw that was dropped. Texas receivers in the first half alone, you mentioned it, they had 5 drops in the first half. 5. That's usually like a lot for a whole game, and they had 5 drops in the first half. When your quarterback is that red hot against Georgia, against Kirby Smart, you better capitalize. You better go into halftime with like 24 points on the board already with your quarterback playing that hot. And in the second half, he had a 60.1 passing grade. Second half in overtime, I should say. He had a 60.1 passing grade, really came back down to earth, and then the Texas offense stalled out again. So when you have a quarterback playing that well with a 93 passing grade and you could only score 2 field goals with that, that's unacceptable, honestly. And I think that is, listen, that's why the grade is so high overall, is because he was that freaking good in the first half. The problem was in the second half when he cooled off, that's when they started to play a little bit better, but it was just too little too late at that point. And you better take advantage of that in the first half. And Texas as a team did not take advantage. And, we've been saying it all year, Dalton. It's really been about Texas. Yeah, they're so good around Quinn Ewers, but Quinn Ewers is the one who's kind of been screwing it up lately. In the first half, it was actually Quinn Ewers that was leading the charge, and everyone around him was screwing up. So it was kind of the opposite in the first half, and that's why ultimately Texas, I think, lost this game.
And much is always made of the Kirby Smart speeches and halftime speeches and things like that. And I have to think down 6-3 at halftime, with as bad as the first half went, as bad as everything went offensively, and then the exclamation with Carson Beck getting hurt, and we'll see what his status is in the coming weeks. He had to have gone in and told his team at halftime, we may have just played the worst half of football we played all season, and we're down 6-3. Even if it's Gunnar Stockton out there, we don't know yet with Carson Beck, if he's going to be out, we have a shot to win this game because we can make stops and we can manufacture offense. And as long as we're just any better than we were in the first half, because Georgia was, they were just awful in the first half of this game, especially offensively. They established nothing, and then Beck got hurt. I think that's exactly what Kirby told his team was, we're in this. Don't go all doom and gloom on me. We played like crap for a half, but we're down 6-3. This is a ball game. And Gunnar Stockton comes right in and gets a touchdown drive and puts him up 10-6 and puts a jolt into him. I know he kind of struggled from thereafter, especially the interception late in the fourth quarter really could have hurt him. But you've got a moment here where I think it's about Kirby Smart just keeping his team on track through adversity. And Texas did not take advantage. This game could have easily been over at halftime the way Georgia played in the first half. And Kirby kept them in the pocket. And this is what they do. This is the part where people talk about the championship experience, and that's really why you don't want to play Georgia on top of Kirby Smart, the defensive schemes and all that. This is why. Because I'm not sure how many other teams and how many other coaches in the country win this exact game with the script the way it went.
So let's talk more about Georgia. Most impressive part of this game for you?
Give me Daylen Everette out there at corner. Look, in a game like this on defense, sometimes you just need somebody to step up, whether it's a superstar, maybe a guy we don't talk about as much. I don't think we've talked about Daylen Everette quite as much as we do a Malachi Starks or a Jalen Walker or somebody like that. But 2 interceptions, you could argue, were maybe the 2 biggest plays in the game, right? The first drive of the game when Texas was coming in to score and he catches the deflection for the first interception. The interception in the fourth quarter was just spectacular. I mean, I'll tell you what, I watched a few of these snaps this morning. Daylen Everette in man coverage was just fantastic. And then you had the first down play in overtime on the corner route. It was kind of an ISO corner route where they were still trying to attack him, and a pass breakup there too in overtime, and eventually Texas kicking a field goal again. Daylen Everette in man coverage in this game was spectacular. 9 targets, 3 catches allowed, 47 yards total, 2 interceptions, the pass breakup, and an 84.8 coverage grade. He was the best player on Georgia's defense, and obviously, he gave up a couple of catches, and he had a pass interference late in the game that, could have hurt him, but he came back, had the pass breakup, made plays when they needed to, and he was just terrific.
Absolutely, yeah, he was outstanding. He's a guy that I think has been really underrated in the whole NFL draft process as well. I think that's a guy that you and I are probably going to be a lot higher on than most people going into the NFL draft, if he decides to go to the NFL draft. I'm saying on the Georgia defensive side, obviously, I'm going with the Georgia run defense. They completely shut down the Longhorns in this game and really made that offense solely reliant on Quinn Ewers. They were solely reliant on Quinn Ewers. Texas had 58 rushing yards total in this game. They averaged 2.6 yards per carry. It's their fewest rushing yards and fewest yards per carry since 2022 when they played TCU. Negative .463 EPA per run. Dalton, they had 2 runs that went for 25 yards combined. Their other 20 carries went for 33 yards combined. So they had 2 good runs in this game. The other ones, they averaged like 1 yard per carry, essentially, or a little bit over 1 yard per carry on the other 20 runs in this game. If you make Texas completely one-dimensional offensively, you have a great shot because we talked about before, Quinn Ewers, you have the hot in the first half, and then you have the cold in the second half. And if you're solely relying on Quinn Ewers to be hot the entire game, probably not going to work out for Texas too well, and that's really what happened in this one.
And something to note here, and I'm fact-checking this right now because I remember this being a thing. I believe, yes, Texas' 2 lowest rushing totals by far. In every other game this season, aside from the 2 Georgia games, they have at least 130 yards rushing. In the 2 Georgia games, they have 88 and 58. That's that Georgia. Look,
about 130, yeah, combined.
Right,
yeah.
the two combined. You're talking about that's 146 right there.
Yeah.
So I mean, even then, well below their average of what they do in every other game this season. Georgia, there's 2 constants on the field with them. We've seen it all year. Look, Beck's been inconsistent. There's times where the pass rush is inconsistent. The receivers lead the country in drops. 2 constants: pass protection on offense, especially in the interior. And Tate Ratledge was great in this game. And their run defense, I won't question their run defense one bit. Michael Williams and all those guys up front, they can stop the run without question. It'll be interesting to see who they get as a matchup after their bye and into the quarterfinal about they're going to play a run-heavy team. And is that the type of team that they would rather see going, okay, our run defense might be the greatest strength of our whole team because it's every single week with this. It's one of the few constants, right? No matter what their offense looks like, if they can stop the run, make a team one-dimensional, then you make a team throw into Daylen Everette and Malachi Starks and everything they have on the back end and Kirby's coverages. Look, without Carson Beck, we don't think they can win a national title. It's been done before. Backups can win championships. We've seen it in Super Bowls. We've seen it. You remember Cardale Jones at Ohio State, runs like that. But they're always a threat, Georgia. They have Kirby. And he's going to go out there and coach his best game, and they're going to go out there and play hard as hell like they did in the second half of this game, no matter who's at quarterback. And they're going to win other ways than just this is what they do. They don't air it out like that, like in Oregon, or like Texas or some of these other teams. They can win games other ways, and they proved it again in this game. Kirby Smart, just an incredible job in this game. The game plan first to once again stop the Texas rushing attack, and then to keep his team in line after Carson Beck got hurt. It's as good a coaching job as he's done all year.
It's a phenomenal job by Georgia and Kirby Smart, but I'd be remiss after mentioning the 2 key injuries that I know one's been out the entire year, so it matters still. But C.J. Baxter, the running back, obviously would have been their top running back this year. He was a 5-star recruit a couple years ago coming out of high school. Everyone thought after Jonathan Brooks left, he was like, okay, this is the new guy for Texas. He, of course, goes down in the preseason with an injury, out for the entire year. And then also Calvin Banks Jr., probably maybe the best left tackle in college football this year. I would argue the best left tackle in the NFL draft. He obviously was out in this game as well. That's another big loss for that offensive line too. So Texas overall had a 62.7 run blocking grade in this game. So wasn't great, and obviously also the rushing without C.J. Baxter, which I know they've been out with him all year, but it's another big loss for that Texas run game as well. And it's going to be interesting now, Dalton. Before we move on to the next game, I want to talk about these 2 teams in the grand scheme of things now. Where do you think – so Georgia is locked in at number 2. I think that's a guarantee.
I would assume so, yeah.
First question. If Beck is out, how enticing is it now to play Georgia if you're like the 7 versus 10?
It's more enticing, but it's still because of Kirby and their defense and the way that they can win games around their quarterback as opposed to relying on him. I still don't sit there and go, oh yeah, I want to play the Georgia Bulldogs and Kirby Smart now, all the talent they have. Like I'm still not itching to do that. I think whoever's
would you rather play Georgia without Beck or Arizona State? I think it might be Georgia without Beck.
I think it's still Arizona State. And I know they're raging hot on offense, and we know for a fact Jordan Tyson is done for the season.
Yeah,
I think I'd still rather play Arizona. And Arizona State's terrific. We'll get to them, but that's still Kirby and Georgia, and they can find ways to win. And if it's Gunnar Stockton, still have 3 weeks to prepare and get him ready to go. I'm still not.
And he was a 4-star coming off high school. He's talented.
I'm not going to sit here and willingly say, oh, yeah, I'd rather play Georgia. We got him this time because that's what we thought when Carson Beck got hurt last night. Oh, well, Texas, they have to win now.
Yeah.
Right? There's no way that Carson Beck's out. There's no way they can't win now. And then Georgia finds a way. And just, again, the championship pedigree and the way that Kirby, you got to remember, he's a defensive coach. He's perfectly fine winning games like this. And for as ugly as it was, and it was ugly to watch, a win is a win.
Yeah.
And that's Georgia's mentality, and I think that's what it's going to be moving forward. I'm not – no, in a one-game scenario, I'm not trying to see Kirby Smart.
Okay, interesting. I'm still fascinated by this whole Carson Beck development and see how badly injured he was. Obviously, him playing at all.
It's kind of like the old Patriots thing where it's like, oh, do you want to play the Patriots in the playoffs this year? No, I don't.
I also thought it was crazy that Jaden Rashada was not the one to go in for that last play. They put in the one-armed Carson Beck over Jaden Rashada. I was a little surprised by that too. That was interesting.
Trusting your guys,
I guess, yeah. And all right, second question before we move on to the next game. Texas, what do you do with them now? Do they go to 5? Do they go to 6? Do they go to 7? Because they lost to Georgia. It's a great team, but like you got to remember, they lost to a backup quarterback for the entire half.
I think they're going to look more so at the fact that the game went to overtime.
And keep them at 5.
They're going to be 5 or 6.
Yeah, I think
they might be below Notre Dame, maybe. Texas doesn't have a ton of super quality wins. A&M is probably the best win this season, right? I know the win at Michigan was impressive, but they were 7-5 eventually. I assume Texas is going to be 5 or 6.
Okay,
I think that's where we're going to end up.
Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.